What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode. Dr. Mike Axler here, professor of exercise science, PhD in kinesiology and applied physiology, and 60-plus time marathoner and ultramarathoner. There is a lot of talk currently over social media about health span and lifespan or longevity, and that's for good reason too. We all want to live long, happy, healthy lives, right? And have you ever thought to yourself, what is the best way to eat right now so that you can live the longest and healthiest life for many, many years to come? Have you thought about going vegetarian or vegan or plant-based? It's basically all the same thing. Or perhaps on the other end of the spectrum, completely keto or carnivore. Or maybe somewhere in the middle. Who should you listen to? What's the research say? And importantly, how do the oldest and healthiest folks today typically eat, which does allow them to achieve both longevity and health span well into their 90s and even 100s? That's what we'll be covering in today's episode. We'll be taking a deep dive into the science-based nutrition and longevity space, much further beyond whatever TikTok or influencer fads you may have heard, and this is all going to be science-based. Along the way, we will also be detailing what the people in blue zones typically do and eat, of course, in order to live well into their 90s and 100s. And the reason why we research this and we talk about this and practice this is because longevity isn't just like a 2024, 2025 buzzword, which is only hot for the minute or the year. It is what really everyone should be looking to attain, as well as that of our family and our friends. We want to not only maximize the years in our life, but accordingly the life in our years. And as you probably guessed or already know, nutrition plays a much larger role in how well we age, how well we perform and recover, and probably a little bit more so than you would expect. So, if you'd like to know where the science currently stands with respect to nutrition and longevity, then I do invite you to continue watching and or listening. So, let's start off today talking about what do the longest lived people actually eat? Because it's pretty fitting to just poll the people who have lived the longest, right? You don't want to talk to a 20-year-old and talk to like a 100-year-old, like, what'd you eat, right? So blue zones. Let's talk about some of the truths and science-backed truths versus some of the myths and what you may have heard. The blue zones, which have been made famous by this guy Dan Buettner, are areas with high concentrations of centenarians, or people who consistently live into their 100s. These are areas in the world which include Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Loma Linda, California, Nicoya, Costa Rica, among others. If you don't know about the Blue Zones research or the Blue Zones projects, if they didn't come to your city, or you haven't seen the Netflix documentary, Buettner did partner with National Geographic to identify regions with disproportionate numbers of people living into their 100s. These populations weren't chosen randomly. They were vetted based on verifiable demographic data. Each blue zone has unique cultural and environmental factors. For instance, Okinawans follow the concept of ikigai, which translates to life purpose, while Loma Lindans, longevity ties heavily to Adventist faith-based routines and abstinence from tobacco and alcohol. So much of what we'll be talking about today with respect to blue zones goes far beyond just diet. The diet of folks living in blue zones are known to be high in whole plant foods, legumes, and fermented foods, while being low, and this is the kicker, in ultra-processed foods and added sugars, which is the exact opposite of Americans. A commonality is a high fiber intake, mostly from beans, lentils, sweet potatoes, and vegetables. This likely supports things like gut health, blood glucose control, all of which can help to reduce systemic inflammation. They consume minimally processed foods, so no soda, no chips, no fast food, no candy, and the majority of their calories come from minimally altered sources, which does limit calorie density and encourages satiety. But blue zones also have strong social support, such as social support, as well as daily movement and lower chronic stress. And as we had said, nutrition is just one part of a much larger picture. In Icaria, Sardinia, and Nicoya, for example, there are multi-generational households, and that's a common thing, which provides emotional support and lowering incidences of social isolation, which is very prevalent today, which, as we know, is a key factor in longevity, just not being alone. Further, physical activity is habitual. It is not gym-based. It is woven into their lifestyle through things like farming, walking hills, gardening, and preparing food from scratch. There are some misinterpretations, as we said, with respect to the blue zones, such as many people do assume, however, their plant-based diets means no animal protein at all. But this is incorrect. Most blue zone diets include small amounts of things like fish, eggs, and dairy. Most blue zones are plant predominant, not plant exclusive. For example, Sardinians do eat goat cheese and fish regularly, however, just not in large portions. The Adventists in Loma Linda show variability. Some of the folks are vegan, others are vegetarian, and some consume small amounts of meats. They're more omnivores. The key is that animal products are infrequent and high quality, so very much not fast food on the daily. Recent critiques note that genetics and lifestyle do play a large role. Diet is not the sole reason for their longevity. Longevity, as we know, and we'll talk about more today, is multifactorial, as sleep, purpose, low stress, clean air, physical environment all matter as well. Simply copying their diet does not guarantee results without the rest of the lifestyle. Some modern researchers argue that blue zones could be potentially romanticized and oversimplified or selectively interpreted, especially when applied to Western populations without much context. Whatever the case may be, and however you'd like to view the blue zones, it is quite remarkable how such large populations of people can regularly live into their 90s and 100s when most folks in the US these days are overweight with high blood pressure. So let's now get into the actual nutrition research, beginning first with protein intake. Protein intake, as we know, is crucial for healthy aging, as muscle, or skeletal muscle more exactly, is metabolic gold as we age. Let's first talk about the main problem, which is going to be sarcopenia, which I've talked quite a bit about on this channel because I feel strongly about it and mitigating it. Sarcopenia, if you know what it is the gradual loss of muscle mass and strength, and it begins earlier than most people think, around the age of 30. On average, we do lose around 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade, with a much sharper acceleration after the age of 60. And this loss isn't just cosmetic or performance related, it is linked to increased frailty, increases in falls, and metabolic disease. The earlier we start resistance training, aka lifting weights, and nailing down our protein intake, the better we can fight sarcopenia over the long term. More on muscle. Skeletal muscle isn't also just for movement. It also acts as a very necessary glucose reservoir and a metabolically active endocrine organ. Lower muscle mass means poorer glucose regulation, which increases the risk for type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Several studies link low lean mass and physical weakness with cognitive decline and dementia risk, likely due to reduced activity, poor insulin sensitivity, and chronic inflammation, which is a very real triple threat of aging. Luckily, however, high protein intake preserves lean mass and functional strength. As we age, we need more protein to stimulate the same amount of muscle growth. That's why researchers now recommend 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram per day, especially for those folks who are 60 years and older and are physically inactive. That's nearly twice the current RDA, which is around 0.8 grams per kilogram per day, which is only the minimum to just avoid deficiency, not optimize function or longevity. So if you want to put this in terms of numbers, a 70 kilogram adult who weighs 154 pounds should aim for around 85 to 140 grams of quality protein per day. And I'm going to get to quality next. Let's talk about the plant versus the animal sources. So leucine-rich sources, such as those coming from dairy, whey, eggs, fish, and lean meats, stimulate muscle protein synthesis better than plant-based proteins alone. Leucine, if you don't know, is the main amino acid that triggers mTOR, which is the metabolic switch for muscle protein synthesis. Animal-based proteins naturally have more leucine per gram, which makes them more effective for muscle building. While plant proteins can work and plant proteins are healthy, you would need much larger amounts or strategic combinations, such as rice and beans or plant-based protein blends, for example, to reach the same leucine threshold, something called protein complementarity, and you need around 2.5 to 3 grams per meal. Further, for the older adults do have anabolic resistance, such that they need more protein per meal to maximize muscle protein synthesis. This term, anabolic resistance, means the body's ability to build muscle in response to protein becomes less efficient with age, especially after 60. So instead of needing 20 grams per meal, older adults may need 30 to 40 grams of high quality protein in order for them to maximize muscle protein synthesis. Protein timing also matters. Consuming evenly spaced meals with adequate protein versus one large serving at dinner helps maintain muscle protein synthesis throughout the day, which is going to help promote muscle retention and muscle repair. This is called pulse feeding, which is more advantageous than large bolus feeding. Alrighty, now let's get on to calorie restriction versus strength preserving diets, because this is pretty hot right now too. So let's talk about the calorie restriction versus resistance debate. First off, calorie restriction. Calorie restriction has been proven in animal models to extend lifespan, but often reduces strength, it reduces libido, and it reduces the immune system in most humans. In rhesus monkeys and rodents, long-term calorie restriction, such as reducing calorie intake by around 25 to 40%, which is pretty heavy, significantly extended lifespan and delayed age-related disease. But these results haven't been fully translated to humans due to biological and lifestyle differences. Obviously, we're not rhesus monkeys or rodents, we're human beings. In people, sustained caloric restriction often leads to decreases in muscle mass, decreases in libido, decreases in the thyroid hormones T3 and T4, and decreases in immune function, so you'll get sick more often. These are all signs that the body is entering a survival state, not an optimized and healthy one. Remember, longevity without quality of life isn't the goal. We want longevity and health span. Further, calorie restriction from the calorie study. This calorie trial was the most rigorous long-term calorie restriction study in humans, and it did show that participants experienced reduced blood pressure, reduced cholesterol, and reduced inflammatory biomarkers. But these folks also lost lean body mass and bone mineral density, especially for the folks who weren't consistently resistance training. This does highlight a key trade-off. The metabolic health improved, but both structural and functional health declined. For active aging, that is a red flag, especially if muscle and bone loss increase your risk of falls, frailty, or metabolic rebound. So a fair question to ask now is, what is going to be better? And I'm going to add some science-based things here for you all to think about. So number one is to focus on protein-forward, nutrient-dense eating without chronic underfueling. So rather than extreme caloric restrictions, such as 25 to 40%, a better approach may be mild energy control paired with adequate protein, such as around 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram per day, along with a hearty amount of both fiber and micronutrients. Remember, think performance nutrition, not starvation. We need to be strong. Underfueling, even unintentionally, can lead to low energy availability, which does impair hormonal health, recovery, and long-term gains. Eating to support your training and sleep is a better route to healthspan. Further on this, in addition to all of the nutrition, include strength training, enough calories, and sleep, all of which protects against frailty and injury. Resistance training, lifting weights, as we had discussed, is the most potent natural longevity drug that we have. Resistance training is going to be protective of muscle mass. It's going to maintain insulin sensitivity. It's going to help improve bone mineral density and reduces our risk of falls, especially combined with adequate fueling and rest. Sleep and calories are also recovery tools. When paired with lifting, they help build rather than break your body down. So long-term health is about what you can sustain, not what you can restrict. And the last big section here is going to be talking about anti-inflammatory and nutrient-rich eating patterns, which a lot of the centenarians do follow. First off, let's talk about longevity-linked dietary patterns, and you may have heard of some of these before. The first one is going to be the Mediterranean diet. This is the best evidence we have for lowering cardiovascular disease risk, improving cognition, and reducing all-cause mortality. The Mediterranean diet is rich in monounsaturated fatty acids, so the MUFAs, such as sources from olive oil. The Mediterranean diet is also rich in omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish. It's also rich in antioxidants and fiber. And all of these taken together, the monounsaturated fatty acids, omega-3s, antioxidants, and fiber, all exhibit anti-inflammatory and cardioprotective effects. Meta-analyses show significant reductions in major cardiovascular events when people largely stick with these dietary trends long term. This healthy eating pattern also supports brain health. Long-term adherence has been associated with reduced risk of Alzheimer's and cognitive decline, likely due to the synergistic effect of omega-3s, polyphenols, and low glycemic load foods. The Mediterranean diet is rich, as we'd said, in things like olive oil, fatty fish, nuts and seeds, dark leafy greens, legumes, and berries. Each of these foods contributes to cellular resistance, such that olive oil provides oleic acid and polyphenols, which reduces oxidative damage. Fatty fish coming from sardines, mackerel, and salmon do supply EPA and DHA, which is integral for brain and heart function. Dark leafy greens and legumes are packed with folate, fiber, and magnesium, which support metabolic health and reduce homocysteine, which is a marker linked to vascular and cognitive aging. So the Mediterranean diet is a well-known longevity-promoting dietary trend that a lot of Blue Zones residents follow relatively closely. The next two are the DASH and Nordic diets, which also show benefits in blood pressure reducing effects as well as insulin sensitivity. The DASH diet, or the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, it's an acronym diet, which is rich in fruits, rich in vegetables, and rich in whole grains, as well as low-fat dairy, has been shown to lower systolic blood pressure by around 8 to 14 millimeters of mercury, which is comparable to a lot of medications. The Nordic diet includes hearty amounts of rapeseed oil, which is canola oil, root vegetables, whole rye, and fish, all of which can improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammatory biomarkers in middle-aged and older adults. So a little bit on these micronutrients that these dietary trends exhibit from the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, and the Nordic diet. We discussed omega-3s, and the omega-3s matter because they do reduce chronic inflammation and offer protection for the brain and heart. So more specifically, EPA and DHA, which are found in fish oil, are incorporated into cell membranes and help modulate inflammatory pathways, which is important in slowing age-related diseases. In older adults, omega-3s have been known to enhance cognitive function and memory, and can even reduce brain atrophy in those at risk for Alzheimer's. Polyphenols, which are found in berries, tea, dark chocolate, are linked to cellular protection and reduced DNA damage. Polyphenols like resveratrol and flavonoids, which is a whole group of compounds from berries, tea, and dark chocolate, help reduce oxidative DNA damage and support mitochondrial function, which are very much keys for longevity. And a note on that too, probably go a little bit heavier on the natural teas and the berries and a little bit lesser so on the dark chocolate, but I don't know if I'm going to sell anyone there. Vitamin D, magnesium, and B12 are all very highly concentrated in the Mediterranean diet, as well as the DASH diet and the Nordic diet, are all critical for energy metabolism, brain function, and muscle performance, such that low vitamin D is linked to sarcopenia, falls, and depressive symptoms. Magnesium supports over 300 enzymatic reactions, including ATP production, and we say that magnesium is like the shortstop, it's like the utility player who does everything in the body, and vitamin B12 is essential for myelin integrity and neurotransmitter synthesis. And this deficiency is common with age and impairs memory and mood. So with all that being said, we just threw out a bunch of science-backed nutrition tips on some of the best diets and some of the best micronutrients, which can help increase health span and longevity. This is what social media gets wrong. Let's talk about some of the common myths and see if we can just kind of settle the score here. So number one is seed oils are killing you. I don't particularly follow any influencers who say crazy things like this, but for anyone who thinks or shouts out that seed oils are killing you or they're really bad for you, there is no high quality evidence from human trials showing that seed oils from canola oil, soybean oil, or sunflower oil cause inflammation or chronic disease in healthy individuals. In fact, replacing saturated fat with polyunsaturated fats, like those found in nuts, seeds, and seed oils, has been shown to lower LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, and reduce cardiovascular disease risk. The demonization of these seed oils often stems from misinterpretation of oxidation and in vitro studies, not actual human trial clinical evidence. So context and overall diet quality matter more than avoiding specific oils. The next one is the carnivore diet equals longevity. I think this is starting to decline, but I know with like Rogan and some other people, it like really hit the streets, and a lot of my students were saying, I'm going to go carnivore. And I was like, all right, let's talk about this first. So while short-term elimination diets, such as the carnivore diet, may reduce GI symptoms or it could help simplify eating for some folks, there is no evidence linking this dietary approach to improve longevity. In fact, long-term carnivore-style eating lacks fiber, phytonutrients, and can lead to gut microbiome dysfunction and nutrient deficiencies such as vitamin C, folate, magnesium, just to name a few. Large epidemiological studies such as Blue Zones that we talked about today, as well as the EPIC Oxford, show that longevity is associated with things like higher intake of plants, increased intakes of legumes and fiber, and not extreme low carb or meat only diets. On this, some things for you to think about: shortcuts versus sustainability. Fasting, detoxes, and extreme elimination diets may not be sustainable. Intermittent fasting or detoxes might yield short-term results and short-term weight loss due to just extreme calorie restriction, but they are often unsustainable, especially when paired with low energy intake, poor mood, and social disruption. Detox claims are scientifically unfounded. We have a liver and we have 2 wonderful kidneys, which already do all of the detoxing our body needs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So what people often need is just habitual dietary cleanup, not a juice cleanse. Longevity comes from consistency, not extremism. Studies consistently show that small, consistent lifestyle behaviors like walking daily, sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night, and resistance training 2 to 4 times a week outperform extreme fads in the long run for both health span and lifespan. You can think of this like compound interest. Consistent, moderate effort builds momentum. Longevity is not won through 30-day fixes. It is won through decades of daily effort with flexible and enjoyable practices. Awesome. So let's land this plane. If your goal is to age well, stay strong, and live longer, the most effective strategy is not a supplement. It is not a fad diet. It is not a shortcut. It is the compound interest of daily positive habits. Focus on a foundation of, number 1, adequate protein intake to preserve lean muscle mass and metabolic health. 2, whole food nutrition, which is rich in fiber, micronutrients, and minimally processed ingredients. Number 3, consistent resistance training to maintain strength, bone mineral density, and functional movements. And number 4, sufficient sleep, stress management, and social connection for recovery and emotional health. So what can we apply from the Blue Zones folks? Some of their longevity lessons. Populations in Blue Zones like Okinawa, Sardinia, Nicoya, and Loma Linda live longer not because of hacks and quick fixes, but as we said, because of their daily life naturally promotes health. So here is how you can apply the principles of the Blue Zones. 1, eat mostly whole plant-based foods. Blue Zone diets are 90 to 95% plant-based, with plenty of beans, legumes, greens, whole grains, and healthy fats like olive oil, and meat is eaten sparingly, and it is often as a flavor rather than a staple. So an action tip that you can use today is make plant-forward meals your default and include protein-rich plants like lentils, tofu, or beans with most meals. 2nd, move naturally and often. In Blue Zones, people walk, they garden, they do manual chores daily. They don't exercise in the modern sense, they just move around frequently. So an action tip is to get in your 10,000 steps daily, take the stairs, or build movements into your daily routine, such as having walking meetings, stretching between work blocks, getting a treadmill desk, etc. 3rd, manage stress with routine rituals. People in the Blue Zones, these residents have ways to downshift, like naps, prayer, time with family, community meals. An action tip that you can take is add 10 to 20 minutes daily for mindfulness, journaling, or out time, quiet time. Just learn to downregulate. And number 4, stay socially and purposefully connected. Longevity in Blue Zones is strongly linked to social support, a sense of belonging, and purpose. Remember that term, ikigai. So an action tip that you can take is spend time with people who support your healthy habits, volunteer, or re-engage with a hobby that gives you meaning. Awesome. So after all of this, I do hope you enjoyed and learned a couple of things. I thought it was really interesting to really dive into the research, not only of like how can our nutrition support our health span and longevity, because that's like a lot of objective scientific measures, but on the subjective end of things, like how are people already doing that in communities which are vibrant, which are happy, which are healthy, right? So it's kind of a combination of the two. And the Blue Zones projects, which go around the United States and help underrepresented communities, is really important right now, and it's really interesting to learn about. So this was a fun one to make today. If you did enjoy, please like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who might want to hear it, as well as scrolling on down and subscribing to both my Instagram and my podcast, Simple Science, so you can learn about all the most up-to-date exercise science, nutrition, aging, longevity research that is out there. It is all science-based, not trying to sell you anything, just want to get the good word out there. And it is about that time of day when I'm going to go hit the weights, and you should be as well. So remember, everybody, consistency wins, and thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next episode.